In today's video, I'm going to show you how to do the Tunisian Simple Stitch using Tunisian Crochet. This is such a cute stitch and it lives up to its name. It is simple. Perfect for doing washcloths and small projects. I'm sure you could use it on sweaters. I just haven't tried, so today I'm just going to show you how to get started so that you can get creative and start making new projects with the Tunisian Simple Stitch. Let's stitch. A Tunisian crochet hook. It's really old. I actually found this hook in a box of stuff that was given to me by a grandmother, and I didn't even know what it was for. So even though I crocheted, I didn't know what to do with this very long hook. So this is an antique. I would say that it is either an E or an F, just judging by how big around it is compared to my regular crochet hooks. So whatever crochet hook you have, what Tunisian crochet hook you have is fine. If you're just practicing, obviously if you're doing a pattern, you're gonna need to get whatever size hook the pattern calls for. I am using this variegated sugar and cream 100% cotton yarn because the different colors make it really easy to see each of the different rows. Obviously, you can use whatever yarn you have available and go ahead and stitch along and practice so that you can master this very cool type of crochet called Tunisian crochet. So I have just done a slip stitch and put it on to the end of my hook, and I'm just going to chain just like I would do for starting any crochet project, and I'm going to go ahead and chain 20 stitches. There's 4. Stretch this out a little bit. It's getting a little tangly. And I always try to do my chain stitches not like super loose, but I do try to give them a little bit of space, because otherwise when you're trying to work into the chain stitches, things get really tight and gives your project like a weird curve when you're trying to stitch into really tight chain stitches. So just keep that in mind as you're creating those chains, that you do want to have them not be really tight on your hook so that they're easier to work into. All right, let's see how many we got here. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 19, so one more. Okay. So here is stitch 20. If I can not have my hook be turned around again. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. So rather than working each stitch and just letting it hang, we're actually going to be working each row in 2 passes, a front pass and a back pass. Don't get freaked out by that. You'll see how it works. It's really simple. So just logistically, so that you know what it is that you're doing, each row will have a front pass where you pick everything up, and then a back pass where you drop everything back off the hook. So I have seen Tunisian crocheters work into the fronts of stitches. I have also seen them work into this cute little bump on the back of the stitch. The results from those 2 techniques, from my perspective, is that working into this back bump gives you a more finished, polished sort of look. You are welcome to work into the front of the stitches if that is your preference. for this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to get started by working into this back bump on the back of the stitch. So these are the chain stitches that you just did, where you can see each little V created a stitch. If you turn it over to the back side, it makes a line of little straight loops. Each loop, that's what I'm calling the back bump. So I'm going to insert my hook into that back bump, and I'm going to pull up a stitch from each one until I have all of my stitches on my hook. So let's just work down the line here. And if you do have one that's just a little bit tight, just kind of work into that. If it is too difficult for you to get into the bumps, I have heard beginners say that that's a real challenge for them. That's fine, you can work into the front of it. This is not the end of the world that, oh, you have to do it this way or it's not going to turn out. This is your project. You can have it be however you want. You can be as perfectionist as you want. You can focus on quantity over quality when you're starting. Whatever works for you. Okay, so when I get to the end of this, then we will work on doing the back pass and casting everything off. Okay, so now I have picked up all of the loops, and I just want to encourage you to keep going. That very first row is the most difficult part of the entire project, as it always is, which is why I try to do foundation row rather than working in chain stitches, because I don't like working into chain stitches. So, but for Tunisian crochet, that's how it starts. All right, so now we've done that first pass of our foundation row, and now we are going to work our back pass where we cast everything off of the hook. So first you're going to pull through just one stitch, just for the first one. Now for the rest of the row, you're going to go down and you're going to pull through 2 loops, okay? So yarn over and pull through 2. And we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And we're going to do that all the way down to the end. Oop. Get through all that. So one thing about the cotton yarn that I'm working with is that it does separate pretty easily. So just be aware if you're working with this sugar and cream yarn, is that it does tend to separate, and I have had people who are learning to crochet tell me that it is a pain to work with. So okay, so now we've cast all of that off of our hook, and now we are going to do our front pass on the second row. So the first row that you do is called a foundation row, and every Tunisian crochet project that I have seen, granted, I have only been doing Tunisian crochet for less than a year, so if you're a Tunisian crochet expert and you know better, let me know. But every Tunisian crochet project that I've seen starts with this foundation row where you do the chain, you pick everything up, and then you cast everything off, and that creates the foundation for your project. And then you move on with whatever stitch that you're doing. So for the simple stitch, we have our foundation row, this is the end. We do not chain one on that, okay? So I'm not going to do anything with this first one. This is considered to be done, and it is the first stitch of the next row. So I'm going to be working into the front of this second stitch right here, okay? So if you can see the end, we're skipping this end stitch and we're moving on to this one. I'm going to insert my hook and pick up a chain, or pick up a loop. Okay, so we're going to do that all the way down. We're going to go into the front of the stitch and pull up a loop, and the front of the stitch and pull up a loop until we have all of our loops on our hook. And after you've done this for a while and you've mastered this process, it actually goes really quickly. I know when I first was watching videos and I was like, oh, that looks a little complicated. But then when I got into it and I started, you know, just picking up loops, dropping them back off, it actually went really, really quickly. And I was able to complete a washcloth in a really quick amount of time, like less than 2 hours, for the whole washcloth completely finished. So if you can just master these beginning stitches, you will be well on your way to being a Tunisian crocheter. And I have seen some gorgeous patterns done in Tunisian crochet, so you can get really creative with this once you've mastered some basic stitches. All right, so we're coming down to the end. We're just going to keep picking up all the way down out of this front loop, inserting, and then yarn over and pull up that loop all the way till we get almost to the end. Now for the last stitch, this is the only stitch that will be different. You can see this side loop here. What you're going to do is you're actually going to turn this to the side, and if you turn it to the side, you can see an upside down V with this light pink and this light pink. Those are the two loops that we're going to be going through. So I'm going to insert my hook through that one and that one. So now once they're on my hook, you can clearly see those two loops that create one stitch, and that's how we get a very finished edge. So take that little second to identify that, and that will give you a nicely finished edge. If you don't do that, it's not the end of the world. It just, you're not going to have that same polished look on the end of it. All right, so now for our back pass, we're going to yarn over and pull through just one like we did on the last row. And then for the rest of the whole row, we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And this is it. Once you see this, that's what you repeat all the way down. So you're going to be working through that front loop, and then you're going to yarn over, pull through 2 to drop them all off. And I'm going to do a few rows, and then we will look at the results so you can see how it looks once you have worked through the fronts of all those stitches and then drop them all back off. And it's just the easiest thing in the world. Conceptually, it's just a matter of mastering your hook and figuring out how to hold on to everything. And once you've done that, you will be a Tunisian crocheter. And if your stitches are getting a little tight, I have found with Tunisian crochet, that's really normal. So when you're pulling through this loop, you can go ahead and just pull up on that a little bit. Otherwise, it does tend to get a little tight. Another thing that you will notice is that Tunisian crochet curls. And I have seen people use blocking boards. I highly recommend getting a blocking board. If you don't have one, just use a spray bottle and get your project a little moist and then flatten it all out to dry it, because as you can see, it's like we're one row in and it's already curling. So that's completely normal because you're only pulling up from one side. So when you're doing traditional crochet where you're flipping it back and forth, it's getting pulled on both sides. With Tunisian crochet, you're only pulling up from this one side, so there's no counterbalance, and so everything curls up. It doesn't stay like that, so after you're done, you can flatten everything out. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our next row. So remember, we're not working into this end stitch, we're going to be working into the front of this second stitch and pulling up loops all the way down. And again, don't get your stitches too tight, because when you're coming back to do your back pass, it's going to be really hard to work to get through those loops if they're too tight. So you want to be checking to make sure that you've got a little space in between your project and your hook. Otherwise, you're making your project a little more difficult to work with. The tension that you have on the yarn is one of the things that takes the longest to develop the skill for controlling your tension. If you put the effort into that at the beginning, it really makes things a lot nicer for you. But it doesn't matter if you're a seasoned crocheter, if you're working with a different type of yarn, a different type of hook, a different technique, you'll have to readjust your tension. The only difference is that you get better at making those adjustments so they happen a little faster. So we're just working into the front of these loops and picking up loops onto our hook. And then we will go ahead and drop them all off. Just checking to make sure that my loops are staying loose enough so that when I'm doing my back pass, they're not going to be too tight to work through. And again, a lot of that is because of the type of yarn that I'm using. It's a very stiff yarn. 100% cotton's great for things like baskets and washcloths, but it is a little bit stiff. It doesn't have a lot of flexibility. That's just the nature of working with 100% cotton. All right, so we are down to the last stitch. So again, I'm going to turn and look at the end, and I'm going to find like the two sides that make the little V, and I'm going to go through both of those loops and pull up a loop. So I'm working on creating that finished edge of my project. So yarn over and pull through one to create the end loop there, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through two all the way down, making sure that you pull up a little bit on that loop to make sure that you're not getting your tension to be too tight. Alrighty. All the way down, yarning over, pulling through two. And don't worry if it didn't turn out great this time, just take a picture of it and throw it away so that after your next project you can remind yourself how far you've come. It's just important that you don't give up. Just keep trying, because every single time you learn a new technique, you learn a new stitch, you do a new project, you're learning things from it and you're building up your skills. Even things that you might not know that you're working on, you're learning. So, I mean, if you're really struggling with it, you don't even know it, but you are developing a tolerance for frustration that will help you be more patient, like working with yarn that's not flexible and wants to separate and causes you stress. I'm just going to pull out of that and try again. And in hindsight, I probably should have found a more flexible yarn to work with for this. Alright, so let's keep pulling through to almost to the end. Alright. And that is how you do the Tunisian Simple Stitch. And you can see like all of those little loops on the front, they make a really cool pattern. It's really unique looking. I just really like, it's still obviously crocheted, but it has such a different look from a traditional crochet that I think they'd make just the cutest washcloths. So if you would like the pattern for my Tunisian crochet washcloths, I will post the link down in the description and you can go ahead and grab that. And in that pattern is also there's two other patterns for Tunisian crochet. So, and you also get pattern for makeup remover pads and a soap bags along with this simple stitch. So you can check out my other videos that will be coming up for doing the Tunisian full stitch along with the Tunisian honeycomb stitch. And don't forget to subscribe so you can keep up with all of my tutorials and all of my new content coming out. And also catch the link for the free pattern for some cozy sock slippers down in the description and get started on your next project. So until next time, happy stitching.